Our trip started at Ashgabat in Turkmenistan, a capital city designed by the first president of a country newly formed in 1991, with the ambition of being a wonder of the modern world. The buildings are all of white marble, and the cars have to be white or silver, and must be kept clean. Our attention was soon drawn to the many imposing statues, but it was the boulevards and the fountains which were of special note. We were told that the city has more fountains than Las Vegas. The flower-lined walkways not only looked beautiful, but were a haven for clouds of butterflies. And we soon appreciated how it was that everywhere was kept so clean and sparkling. No doubt the thousands of workers employed daily on these tasks are one of the reasons why the country can boast of a 6% unemployment rate. We were surprised at how few people were out on the streets. However, the young ladies that were around looked beautiful in their elegant dresses. Once we located the market, we found an environment that we were more used to. And the only surprise was the wonderfully decorated cakes found on many stalls. Locating somewhere to eat was not easy, as flamboyant signs are apparently not allowed. But once inside, the place and the food looked surprisingly familiar. And back outside, the city seemed to have come more to life. By the next morning, all our trip members had arrived, and Anna, our guide, took us on our first outing.
It's very hot, like last summer was extremely hot, it was 55 in the shade.
The first stop was at the Memorial Park, which was unveiled in 2014. It features various memorials. One is a bronze statue of a bull and child, which is to commemorate those that died in the tragic earthquake of 1948. One of the bas-reliefs honouring soldiers in the Second World War is recognised as the largest in the Guinness Book of Records. This commemorates heroes from battles for the motherland. And this monument to eternal glory is 45 metres high to symbolise 1945, the ending of the war. Our next stop was to be Ashgabat's registry office, a structure capable of holding 6 weddings at a time. From there we went to the Monument of Neutrality, a rocket-like structure erected to proclaim Turkmenistan's constitutional declaration of neutrality. On the top stands a statue of the first president, who died in 2007. Our further travels allowed us to admire the elegant facade of the international airport, as well as discovering where some of the city's population lived. And now we could see some of the daily life at the popular Sunday Bazaar. Ladies had a fine choice of the accessories needed to make their dresses, while the gentlemen could clothe themselves Western style if they so chose. Our member Adrienne couldn't resist a new hat for her next winter voyage. Meanwhile, Anna was trying to round us up to move on to the carpet market. Here, Angela was sufficiently impressed with the hand-woven items to strike a bargain and hand over her cash. We now had an optional visit to see the noisy and somewhat smelly animal market, where we could watch sheep, goats and camels changing hands. Next up was the Turkmenbashi Rui Mosque, commissioned in 2004 by the president of that time, who now lies buried there. Turkmenistan has no official state religion, but the majority of the population of Turkmenistan are Sunni Islam.
And this is the biggest mosque in Central Asia and the biggest mosque in the world with one dome.
We then moved on to a much older structure, the once mighty Nisa fortress, which was founded in the 3rd century BC as the capital of the First Parthian Empire. Unfortunately, little of its previous glory now remains. Later, we dressed ourselves up for our group evening meal. But first, we had to visit the National Independence Park. It is indeed a symbol of modern Turkmenistan, with its flamboyant marble and gold buildings, so many varied fountains, and the ever-present guards, as well as the multiple statues of national heroes. But what was equally interesting was that it was a genuine place of recreation, where we saw more local people enjoying life than we had anywhere else so far. However, we were moving on to have a lovely meal at a 6th floor restaurant, and we enjoyed a set menu of local dishes while admiring the illuminations. These horses are everlastingly galloping round a stadium built for the 2017 Asian Games, and the whole city is a kaleidoscope of nighttime colour. And now we were able to celebrate Ian's birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Well done, Anna. 39.
The following day, we set off on a 5-hour coach trip across the Karakum Desert. We stopped for a picnic lunch at the Kaka Oasis, which was once home to the medieval city of Abivert, famous for producing exquisite pottery, of which fragments are still to be found today. Although the roads were pretty empty, we did see signs of agriculture, mainly wheat growing at this time of year, and of industry, including the gas and oil fields from which Turkmenistan derives much of its wealth. We also passed the more traditional means of transport, striding purposefully along the opposite carriageway. And we occasionally came across remote towns, which were a base for cotton mills, as that is the other agricultural product. Eventually, we arrived at our destination, a fine hotel in Mari. This city had a much more lived-in look than we had experienced at Ashgabat. Our hotel even had a swimming pool, which appeared to be available for local people to use as well as guests. Tonight, our group evening meal was at a restaurant in a busy shopping centre. The next day, we visited the UNESCO World Heritage Site of ancient Merv, once one of the great cities of Central Asia. This is a complex area with structures dating over many centuries. As well as taking photos of the sites, we were also able to help other tourists retain memories of their visit. These tombs are important pilgrimage sites, as they reputedly contain the remains of 2 of the companions of Mohammed. Nearby was a water cistern, an important and necessary part of the Silk Road route, as explained to us by Anna.
Only after that they will bake them. And again, they will the sound they have to check the sound should be right and the shape and everything.
Next, we climbed the 30-metre-high fortress walls of the ancient city of Urkala, which is the oldest part of ancient Merv. Once it was a famous and thriving city, although sadly, now it looks more like a giant earthen donut. We found that even in this hot desert region, flowers and butterflies were still able to flourish. Now we have arrived at the universally renowned mausoleum of Sultan Sanjar. It has lost much of its former glory, but the tomb is still honoured and respected by local visitors. Finally, we moved to the slightly earlier mausoleum of Muhammad ibn Zayd, with its beautifully constructed dome and intricate stonework. The following day, we were back on the coach on our way to Farab, the border with Uzbekistan. The desert seemed never-ending. We stopped for a short break to admire the plants and butterflies which thrived even here, and we bought a few goods from a passing trader. Our lunch stop included another birthday celebration for Andrew this time. As we travel on, we cross the mighty Amu Darya River. Finally, we reached the border, where filming must stop. After about 2 hours and around 9 checkpoints, we are safely into Uzbekistan, and in the care of our new leader, Shukrat. In a while, we arrive at a rather nondescript road in Bukhara, and there we find our boutique hotel. Once inside, we find it is a truly beautiful old family house with a welcoming courtyard in which we could finally relax. Next day, we were off on our tour of Bukhara, starting with the Summer Palace, which was last occupied in 1920. Here we have a local guide to explain about the opulent decor. In the gardens, we found numerous craftsmen, all with items designed to tempt us. From there, we passed through a busy square to reach the Ismail Samani Mausoleum, the city's oldest Muslim monument. The Chashma Ayub Mausoleum still contains a fountain of pure water, and our guide used the opportunity to explain the current problems with the Aral Sea.
And whenever the wind will start to, blow, the salt will spread.
Moving on again, we remove our shoes and put on headscarves to enter the Bolo House Mosque, still a busy and functioning place of worship.
It should be really strong material, so that's why this is also we use for.
Shukrat had arranged lunch for us with a choice of Uzbek specialities. We enjoyed this before moving on to hear about the Ark, a royal town within a town as old as Bukhara itself.
They are the writings from that part, some designs.
And there is a wonderful display of books of the Quran.
They left originally.
The royal courtyard is an excellent place for our self-styled King George to look really regal. The men were then left to admire these two beautiful madrasas, while the ladies had a quick look at the hammam or Turkish bath.
So initially, when it was constructed, this was the hammam for the woman, for the royal family.
Next we visited a carpet factory. Here we were able to see the young ladies at their work, using wool that had all been dyed using natural materials. The beautiful display of carpets gave us just too much choice for decision making. Next came a quite different workshop, and here we were happy to buy handcrafted and engraved scissors. Everywhere we looked, people were busy at work. And by now, we found it had been quite a long day. However, we were very pleased with our last visit, viewing the pretty Chor-Minar madrasa. Eventually, there was time for a little rest, while our host family was busy preparing us a typical Uzbek meal. The following day was free for us to do our own exploring, and by now we had mastered the city landmarks. So first stop was the bustling big bazaar. Back in the main square, we found restaurants ready for business. And as it was Friday, the mosque was being prepared for an overflowing congregation of worshippers. Everywhere we looked, there seemed to be a lot of urgent work going on. Maybe this was in preparation for the international fashion show, which was due to happen in a few days. However, our free time allowed for a chance to look at the puppet workshop, where we could admire and maybe buy the beautiful creations. And then there was the nearby synagogue, still functioning, although nowadays there are very few Jewish people living in Bukhara. Shukrat then took some of us to an embroidery workshop, housed in one of the classic narrow and multi-storied houses of the city. We were able to admire the embroidery and even try on some samples, as well as watching the family at work. We also had some time for people watching, always a pleasure in a new country.
They don't know what is internet. They don't have the Wi-Fi. Well, this way they spend their free time.
Everywhere we looked, there were beautiful items of all descriptions aimed at encouraging us to buy something for ourselves or for presents. And for some of us, this succeeded.
I will collect my...
That evening, we enjoyed an evening of traditional dancing and music, along with a fashion show. We then took our last look at Bukhara. Next morning, we set off on a 9-hour drive, initially along a pretty rough road, not helped by the overnight rain. Most of the trip was through the vast Kizilkum or Red Sand Desert. Shukrat explained that temperatures here can range throughout the seasons from minus 40 degrees to over 60 degrees, so the drive is frequently very dangerous. Added to that, the sand used to blow over the road as dunes, but that has been helped by a government initiative of using helicopters to scatter the seed of long-rooted shrubs alongside the road, and these have flourished and helped to stabilise those areas. We had a short break to study the ecosystem for ourselves. We were also told about the industries here and the deposits of gold, uranium, aluminium and copper, as well as the natural gas and oil fields. Fortunately, Shukrat had ordered a simple lunch for us at what appeared to be the only available place along the route. Moving further on, we could see evidence of why the province is also renowned for its agriculture. Then finally, we arrived at our destination in the fortified city of Khiva. Our hotel was just outside the walls, but we soon found our way to the entrance to have a look round. We nervously climbed the steep and dark steps of the Kuna Arc and were rewarded with magnificent views across this 8th century city. Here there is an incredible collection of historic monuments, and although there are buildings from the 18th and 19th century, nothing more modern has been allowed. It really felt like stepping back in time, into scenes straight out of the Arabian Nights. But today, we only had time for a brief look round before nightfall. We had our supper alongside the iconic 56-metre tall Islam Khoja minaret.
From the old city.
Next day, we had another local guide.
It's one of the most historic.
All these beautiful madrasas had once been seats of learning for thousands of students, but now they have been restored to become museums and places of experience for tourists.
Oh, lovely.
Some have become workshops and display areas for the many local craftspeople, while yet another madrasa has used the rooms to make an unforgettable hotel, though unfortunately not for our group. The Kalta Minor minaret was designed to be 70 metres high, but unfortunately work stopped when it reached only 29 metres. The revered Pahlavan Mahmud Mausoleum has some of Khiva's most lovely tiling on the sarcophagus and the walls. The Juma Mosque, however, is remarkable in quite a different way. The roof is supported by 212 carved wooden columns, each one unique. Some date from the 10th and 11th centuries, while others have been brought from elsewhere or carved as replacements in more recent times, and each has its own history.
Again, welcome to our country, Uzbekistan. Thank you very much.
It was time to say farewell to this beautiful and very popular city. Now we were setting off on the next leg of our trip, a 10-hour night-time train journey. We were fortunate in having a compartment between each two of us, and Shukrat had kindly provided us all with a midnight feast. At 2:45 a.m. we arrived safely at Samarkand. In the morning we found that we were in a lovely little hotel, beautifully decorated, and complete with a sheltered courtyard, plus a swimming pool. Our first stop of the morning was at the mausoleum of Amir Timur, who is more commonly known to us as Tamerlane. As a famous nomadic conqueror of the Eurasian steppe, he commanded armies that were feared throughout Asia, Africa and Europe. The mausoleum is beautifully decorated and is also the resting place of his sons and grandsons. We then moved to the world-famous Registan Square, which has been a focal point of Samarkand life for many, many centuries. However, it was in the 15th and 16th centuries that the 3 separate madrasas now enclosing the square were built. Each is different with its own history and decor, and they have been carefully restored. However, nowadays the interiors are mostly devoted to craft and souvenir stalls, as well as being places of recreation.
Smile.
We next followed the crowds through the attractive gardens to reach the Bibi Khanum Mosque. The building of this mosque started in 1400, when it was designed to be the largest mosque in Central Asia. Sadly, it did not stand the test of time, first deteriorating into ruins before being restored, then collapsing again during an earthquake. It was restored again during the Soviet era, and now at least the facade stands proudly in Samarkand. Soon after this we came across a small festival with some lively dancing, promoting tourism in Samarkand. Later in the evening, after supper, we had a more peaceful view as we admired the illumination of Registan Square. Next morning we were taken to see the observatory created by the astronomer Ulugh Beg, which was destroyed in 1449. Nowadays we can only see the remains of part of the sextant, but the adjoining museum had models showing how the astronomers would have taken their meticulous measurements. The calculations that they made of the length of a stellar year was only 1 minute different from modern calculations. We then moved on to the Shah-e-Zimna site of mausoleums, which is still a revered place of pilgrimage. Shukrat explained to us that there has been considerable restoration done relatively recently.
And this is the restoration that has been done in the year of 2006-2007. In modern tiles, you can see there are a lot of cracks.
But nonetheless, the stunning avenue of mausoleums contains some of the richest tile work in the Muslim world.
This is worth coming to. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Next day we were off in the coach again. We stopped en route to enjoy a samso, a favourite local snack like a Cornish pasty, but baked in a circular oven like this. We also stopped to see another local attraction. Arriving in Tashkent, we found our 17-storey hotel was very different from our last home. At night it even turns into a giant billboard. But almost as soon as we arrived, so did our new local guide, ready to show us the sights of Tashkent. Following our view of the Navoy Theatre, we moved to a lovely wooded area where attention has been made to nature's needs. Here we saw the Monument of Courage or Earthquake Memorial, which commemorates the earthquake that almost destroyed Tashkent in 1966, and from which it has been rebuilt. We then moved to Hast Imam Square, the religious centre of Tashkent. The Hazrat Imam Mosque here was built in 2007 in a record-breaking 4 months, and was a very expensive undertaking with exotic materials imported from India, Turkey and Iran. Although it is able to accommodate thousands of worshippers, there is yet another mosque even now being constructed very nearby. In the centre of the square is a library which contains a major collection of Qurans, including one reputed to be one of the oldest in the world. The madrasa on the other side of the square now houses workshops and craft shops. We then moved on to visit the Chorsu Bazaar, an indoor and outdoor market where helpful sellers offered anything you might or might not need. Finally, we went to the metro where, for 12 pence, we were able to buy a token to take us anywhere on the line. We stopped at several stations, as each was decorated in its own unique style. And then came our final dinner.
You have been the best tour guide ever.
Your group was excellent on purpose. Everyone shared the same ideas, same moments, same trip. No one was complaining about anything. That's very rare. Welcome back again anytime.